I'm Pray for Enemy, and this is your August polling update. We're talking poll numbers, we're talking strengths, we're talking weaknesses, and all the narratives in between. Let's go! So the first candidate we got to talk about is obviously Donald Trump. He's still first place in the polls, 52% nationally, 50% in Iowa, and 41% in New Hampshire. I almost misspoke there. Let's talk about his strengths for a second. I think he's still the leader of the Republican Party. It's really his race to lose, and he has somewhat of an incumbency advantage because he's one of the only presidents or presidential candidates who has the audacity to run again after he's lost. And then also good news for him, at least in terms of poll numbers, is he's still getting indicted.
I did everything right and they indicted me.
Okay, he's on his third indictment, and it looks like this is the end of the indictments, but every time he gets indictment, his poll numbers go up a little bit. So after that first one in April, he got a really big bump, and now that the indictment season's over, we'll see if that was sort of a sustained thing that'll take him through, election, or if it's, kind of just the sugar high. It's too early to tell right now. I have the feeling that it's going to be a sustained thing, but that's just my opinion. I think his biggest weakness, though, he's not a perfect candidate, is that he's basically unelectable in the general election, and he's losing kind of that donor set of the Republican Party, that sort of core establishment, sector of the Republican side of things. And to that end, I think that people are going to use the indictment, very powerful people on the Republican side of things, might use this indictment to kind of scoot him out of the way. So we could be looking at a race that just has the top guy taken out of it. That's very possible, at least in my imagination. I think the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation types, really don't want him around too much longer. So that's what I think about Donald Trump and the weaknesses that I see right now. But again, I have to come out with a conspiracy theory about how people want to move him out of the way, because there's really no weaknesses that I see in Donald Trump. He really is a very strong candidate, strongest Republican primary candidate we've seen in a long time, and that's kind of the story of the situation. Numero dos, we're talking about Ron DeSantis. Nationally, he's at 18.4%, but in those early states, he's still a little behind despite spending so much money. I mean, 17 a pop in Iowa and New Hampshire, right? So his strengths, I genuinely can't tell you, okay? I literally thought about it for 30 minutes, and I can't tell you a single strength of his campaign. But the weaknesses, I mean, I could go on forever. How long do you have? He's had several messaging mistakes so far. I think sort of just in general, the anti-woke stuff. He says woke he wakes up in the morning, he kisses his wife, and then he says woke. That's just kind of how Ron DeSantis has been rolling the entire campaign. That anti-LGBTQ 4chan ad was probably not the best thing in the world. And then this, most recent one where he puts the Nazi dog whistle symbol in there. It's like, oh, come on. Like, this campaign has obviously been hijacked by Nazis. Again, he's like, shoveling people out left and right. He's got like 38 people that he's fired now. Last time I made a video on Ron DeSantis, it was 10. So if you want, basically nothing's changed since then. So if you want more, insight into, how bad the Ron DeSantis campaign is doing, go ahead, check out that other video. But as of right now, I think that's just like what's happening with Ron DeSantis. It's not like people are interested in Ron DeSantis because his stance on Medicaid and Medicare, okay? It's, about the vibes, and the man just doesn't have it. Vivek Ramaswamy, I told you he's at third place. He's a very humble polling numbers right now, but it's a very crowded field. 5% nationally, 4% in Iowa, and 4% in New Hampshire. And now the caveat I got to throw out there, I only want to talk about the early states for most of these candidates, but he does a lot better in sort of later states. So states like Florida, states like Texas, California, where these Republicans are a little bit more kind of into that sort of like tech side of the Republican Party. I don't know what to call these, but I mean, you know who these people are. But, let's get into his strengths. Small donors and grassroots excitement. He has like a billion different individual contributors to his campaign. A lot of them, he likes to brag about this, are first-time donators to the Republican Party or to a Republican candidate. So I think there's a lot of grassroots excitement there, and I also don't think that he's been sort of put on that national spotlight in a way that other candidates have. And I think that once that happens around the debate time, then he's going to be starting to eat people's lunch, and then he'll really get, catapulted into that stage. And I think his poll numbers will probably rise. And I think the next time I deliver this polling update, he's going to be at number 2. Okay, that's just a hot take I'm throwing out there. By the way, the first Republican debate is happening on August 23rd. You're going to want to subscribe to this channel because we are covering it. Again, in terms of weaknesses, I just think that this might not be the right time. Maybe he's at the right place at the wrong time. And, maybe the field is just a little bit too crowded. Maybe Donald Trump is too strong of a candidate. Maybe there's no oxygen in the room. And Vivek Ramaswamy is going to struggle in that environment. And then beyond that, the guy is just very ideologically extreme. I follow him on Twitter, and I really follow what he puts out there, and it's really like the most hardcore sort of barstool conservative, sort of Vineyard Vines conservative talking points. But the caveat I'd put out there is that he does it in a very interesting way. I mean, like, even though I disagree with him, I think he's interesting to listen to, the way he talks. Or kind of scary more for me because I don't agree with his politics. But he delivers it in an impassioned way and kind of connects it back to, the things that Republicans want to hear about national unity and strength and whatever the hell. So he couches that sort of really extreme ideology within some pretty high soaring rhetoric, I think. At number 4, we have God's drunkest driver, Mike Pence. He's polling at 5.2 nationally, 3.7 in Iowa, and 1.7 in New Hampshire. What the hell is happening in New Hampshire, Mike? I'll tell you right now, it's the strength of the evangelical support that he has is what's really keeping him above water in these early states, and I just don't know how well that's going to translate for his success in the primary. See, the problem is that Mike Pence needs evangelicals, but evangelicals might not feel like they need Mike Pence. Something tells me that they think that they can get their agenda done without the support of the president. Because again, American politics electorally has really been against the sort of hardcore pro-lifers. And so I think that they're going to find other avenues to get this done. I think they think that the fight is on the state level. So somebody who comes out there with a really aggressive stance on abortion is, not going to have the same traction or the same sort of excitement coming from that wing of the Republican Party. Beyond that, he's not a very charismatic candidate, and he's, really not too interesting. Again, nobody's going to vote for him based on his stance on, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security benefits. That's just not the type of candidate he is. He's a culture warrior at the end of the day. And I think the Republican voter and the Republican donor are not really playing that game anymore. And I think they're not going to repeat the mistakes of 2020, the midterm elections, where they basically got wiped out because of their extreme rhetoric on abortion. I think they're going to walk it back a little bit. I think people are going to stay away from Mike Pence. So that's where I put Mike Pence right now. Number 5, we have Nikki Haley, 3.7 nationally, and about a point ahead, well, less than that, ahead in Iowa and New Hampshire, those early states. I think in terms of strength, she has solid financials. She's going to have kind of a drip, like an IV drip of donor funding for the rest of the time because, that's just the type of candidate Nikki Haley is. And $5 million in the first period, I mean, that's nothing to laugh at. And I think for Republicans, she's kind of like the Marvel movie of candidates. It's really easy to support her. She's a woman. She's says all the right things. She's got all the right policies if you're into that kind of thing. But the flip side to that is that there's no populist edge. There's no charisma. There's no X factor. A lot of these other candidates have that kind of X factor, and I don't think Nikki Haley necessarily has it. Also, everything she says is so transparently calculated. Every time she says something, I'm like, do you actually believe that? Because, it just comes off so fake. Every time she opens her mouth, every time she, puts a tweet out there, it's kind of it's just not doing it for me. So number 6, we got Tim Scott. He's polling at 3% nationally, only 3%. But in those early states, he's, way above that number. He's at 7.7 in Iowa and 6.7 in New Hampshire. For me, Tim Scott and Nikki Haley are kind of like potato, like a distinction without a difference. They're both kind of just these donor creations. And I guess for me, Tim Scott's a little bit better of a candidate in that regard. Probably just because he has more cash on hand. He rolled over $21 million from his Senate campaign, so he's going to have a lot of ads that he's going to be able to run, and I think that explains the bump in those early states. Iowa and New Hampshire, he's 4 points higher than his national average. I mean, come on, folks, what do you think this is? And then, but the rest of his strengths, I think he's kind of a new face on the Republican Party. I think being black helps to, distract from the fact that he just believes in all the same things that regular Republicans believe, but I think that he's got a lot of middle-of-the-road policies, and then I think that also in a general election, Tim Scott would probably be the most electable guy, in my opinion. I think that he's a kind of a throwback candidate, throwback to a simpler time, at least in the way he talks. But, I think there's no chance in hell he's getting out of this Republican primary, and that's kind of the predicament that Republicans find themselves in is, to win the primary, you have to basically lose the general. Weaknesses, low name recognition, but I think he's got enough money to take care of that. Political ads work, folks. And then he's still a relatively boring candidate. Again, nobody's voting for these candidates based on what they believe on Medicare and Social Security. So, he really has just nothing to say other than this country, people are mean. in Washington, and I'm nice. Like, okay, good job. So next we have Christie at number 7. Nationally, he's at 2.3, 3.5 in Iowa, and in New Hampshire, for whatever reason, he's at 6.7. Don't know what that's about. I think strengths is, well, he set himself very clearly apart from Trump, and he's a very talented political attacker in that regard. So if you're into that sort of anti-Trump thing and you're still a Republican, this is going to be your guy. He's going to be saying things that you really like to hear. But those might be the only people who wanted to hear it. And I think one of his biggest weaknesses is that he's a little bit too dissident on Trump. I think that just the Republican Party just doesn't want to hear it writ large. I think the Republican Party either is, completely on board with Trump, basically in the Trump cult. Then there's people who kind of feel okay about him. They think that he's a little extreme in terms of the way he talks, but they, are willing to eat that for his tax policy. And then there's the never Trumpers who think he's a threat to democracy. I think that that's like 5 people at this point. Also, I think that his campaign has already kind of petered out. Again, he's a one-trick pony. The only thing he's been saying is Orange Man bad. That's true, but we all figured that out in 2016, okay? And everybody figured it out by now. So, congratulations, you genius. You pointed out the obvious. But, as of right now, that's all the people who are hitting the seismograph in the polls. Every other candidate is really not serious, not worth talking about. But let's give some honorable mentions. Let's talk about the kids who are sitting at the kids' table. We got Asa Hutchinson and Doug Burgum, both of which have $21 million to spend on this campaign. Can you freaking believe that? Imagine spending $21 on a campaign and then having 0% in the polls. And it's just embarrassing. This is just embarrassing. Close the campaign, donate it to, whoever's PAC, and then just call it a night. But anyway, if you like that polling update, I would really appreciate it if you liked this video. And if you checked out some of my other content, the last polling update should show up about right here. And then, a video recommendation from the YouTube algorithm should show up around here.
They tell me that I'm never